Welcome everyone to another edition of The Travel Show with host Ted Blank of Ted Blank Luxury Travel and Adventure. And I cannot wait to hear what we are going to talk about today. First of all, great to see you.
Good to see you. Thanks for having me back.
So have you traveled anywhere since I saw you last?
No, I have not.
Store?
I have not. I've been to the grocery store. I went to Wisconsin, so got my passport out and
Does that count?
Made it. I don't know. For being so close, it is kind of a foreign place, isn't it?
It is, but that's kind of fun when you think about how close we are to another state and we go back and forth. That's a lot of what Europe is like, isn't it?
It is. It's interesting when you look at a map of Europe how small some of the countries are and how many borders you can cross without even trying to do that.
But still, it's best, I think, sometimes to really focus, if you have the time and energy and money, to really focus on one area and get to know it, to know the whole country and the rich history.
Yeah, a lot of people will take a trip to Europe and they'll do what I call sort of the survey tour of Europe. They'll spend a day or two in Paris and then a day or two in Rome and, a day or two in Athens. And that's a great way to get a start. But you miss so much. You miss so much by not getting out into the countryside, not getting into some of the smaller places that you can visit. And you rush yourself. And you almost feel like you want to take a vacation when you get back from your vacation. You work so hard.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about traveling to Europe. Do you think that it is safe?
Yeah, so actually, interestingly, Europe on March 1st of 2022 is going to be removing most of the COVID travel restrictions that have applied to Americans. So most countries will not require a pre-departure COVID test. They do require that you be vaccinated. And many of the restrictions within Europe as well are being removed. So I am anticipating that this is going to be a pretty epic year for travel to Europe.
It's exciting to think about.
Yeah.
People, I bet, have kind of delayed their travel plans because of the pandemic the last couple years. And are you seeing more people now saying, gosh, it's on my bucket list. I gotta get it scheduled.
Yeah, I like to joke that we spent those 2 years we weren't traveling, remodeling our houses, and we've run out of bathrooms, we've run out of decks to build,
right.
And so everybody's really chomping at the bit. And I'm really busy with people planning trips to Europe for this year and even into 2023.
That's wonderful. So what are some of the places that you would recommend?
Well, so one of my favorite places in Europe is actually Italy. And it's one of, I think, probably the most popular places for people from Minnesota who want to go to Europe. I'll ask them, where would you like to go? And Italy almost always comes to the very top of the list.
And that's kind of interesting because Minnesotans aren't known for being Italian.
No, but we have Olive Garden, so we've got we've got a flavor for Italy, right? No, it's such a magical place. I mean, it's got everything. It's got history. It's got art, it's got culture, it's got that dolce vita, that fine life. It's famous for its wines, cheeses, Italian food that doesn't quite taste like Olive Garden. It's a little better in the home country. But surprisingly, there are a lot of people who have ethnic roots in Italy as well who have ended up in Minnesota. Usually tell them because they don't have blonde hair.
They don't have blonde hair. So do you find that things like 23andMe have really maybe intrigued people enough to seek out your business and trace their roots?
Absolutely, yeah. It is very interesting because that quest for kind of the family roots and to go back to the place in the old country where the family is from has really taken off. And I think maybe it's a little bit of a consequence of the pandemic in that people had time to do some of that research that they had always put off. My parents have been compiling the family trees and they did the 23andMe test. And
any surprises?
No. Apparently my dad had a cousin he didn't know about, but no surprises. No surprises otherwise. But there are actually cruises now, river cruises and ocean cruises that Ancestry.com hosts. And one of the really cool things you can do is if you book one of these cruises, they will actually arrange a consultation with you before you go. So they'll collect all the information from you beforehand, and when you get there, there'll be somebody who's ready to discuss your specific, family roots and family genealogy with you. And give you a chance to really experience that while you travel and actually get to see some of these places. So definitely a hot topic right now.
And you could help us put something like that together.
Yeah, absolutely. It is actually, can be very complicated because a lot of times the places where people come from aren't the big cities. It wasn't necessarily people from Rome who
Sure.
immigrated to the United States. It was people from smaller towns in southern Italy where there was more poverty, and that was one of the reasons why they immigrated. So it's a much more difficult place to visit, and we can absolutely put something like that together, connect you with a local genealogist, take you to the town hall, the church, to see those baptismal records and birth and death records and all that kind of stuff.
I love this. So tell us more about Italy.
Well, Italy's an interesting country. It is actually shaped like a boot. So if you look at it on a map, it's got a boot and it's got a toe and it's got a heel. Most people who go to Italy are probably going to go for between 7 and 10 days. And in those 7 to 10 days, the most popular itinerary is to visit the cities of Rome, Florence, and Venice. And very typically people will, while they're in Florence, also go to Tuscany, which is the very famous region where Chianti wines and cheeses and that book Under the Tuscan Sun was written. But it's kind of that quintessential countryside Italian feel.
That you see in paintings all the time.
You see in paintings, you see in TV, you see on movies, it's very romantic. And it's one of the places where it actually is like that. When you get there, that Italian countryside in Tuscany is really very beautiful, very charming, very atmospheric.
So if you want to really see some of the places that we talked about, let's pick them apart and give the highlights of each.
Sure. So Rome, of course, is the capital of Italy. It's the eternal city. Legend has it. Yes, legend has it. It was founded by the half-wolf child Romulus. And it, of course, is also the seat of the Catholic Church and has been for over 2,000 years. So the history in Rome, the Christian history stretches back 2,000 years. The Roman Empire dates back, several thousand years before the birth of Christ. So it's a very, very, very old city. And so it's a place people go to see history, primarily. And so kind of the main attractions in Rome, St. Peter's Basilica, the Vatican City, is one. And it's an incredible experience. It's an incredible building just on its own. For many people, there's an added spiritual dimension to it. You can actually go to the Pope's weekly audience, where you can go into an auditorium and listen to the Pope and have a papal blessing. But it's also kind of an art museum. And people maybe don't realize it, but Michelangelo's very famous sculpture, the Pietà, which is the Virgin Mary holding the body of Christ after the crucifixion, is in St. Peter's Basilica. And of course, the Sistine Chapel, painted by Michelangelo, is there. And that is one of those places you really truly have to go to see it, to really understand and really experience it. And I like to tell people, if they're planning to go to Rome, there's a great movie. It's called The Agony and the Ecstasy. And so Charlton Heston played Michelangelo, and Rex Harrison played this Pope Julius II, who arranged for the painting of the Sistine Chapel. It's a really good movie, and it's actually quite historically accurate. And so if you want to understand the story of how that particular work of art came to be, watch that before you go to Rome.
Great advice. What about Florence? What will we see in Florence?
Yeah, so Florence is a much smaller city. It's only about an hour and a half from Rome by high-speed train, and Italy has a very extensive rail network, so it's very easy to get around, whether you're traveling independently or whether you're traveling as part of a group. And Florence is also a city of art, of course. There are two main art museums in Florence. There's the Uffizi Gallery, which is where the Medici family's art collection is. And so lots of very famous works there, Rembrandts and Titians and some very famous artists. One of the most famous is a painting by an Italian artist named Botticelli. And it's called The Birth of Venus, and it's Venus emerging from the sea when she is, born in mythological history. If you Google it, you'll definitely recognize it. And then the other art museum is called the Accademia, and that's the city's art collection. And the highlight of that is, again, another Michelangelo piece called David. And Michelangelo is actually from Florence. And so he got his start there. And so you can see this incredibly lifelike sculpture. It's amazing how Michelangelo could bring marble to life. It's incredible. And you can't really appreciate it unless you see it. So you'll see that in Florence. Florence also is home to the cathedral that the locals call the Duomo, or the Dome. It was designed by an architect named Brunelleschi, and you can actually climb to the top of the dome. It's like the fifth or sixth biggest dome of a church in the world, and it's just this incredible church. It's very different than any other church you're going to see in Italy. And then Florence is also the gateway to Tuscany. It sits in the region of Tuscany, and so you can go for the day, or you can go spend a couple nights in a little villa or a castle or a charming little inn and experience the food and wine of Tuscany when you're in Florence.
And then Venice, of course, we think of Venice and water.
Venice and water, yeah. Venice. So Venice is actually built in a lagoon. Mm-hmm. You and I might describe it as a swamp, but they call it the lagoon. And so it is a saltwater lagoon, and Venice is crisscrossed with all these little canals. There are actually no streets in Venice. So the only way to get around is either on foot or on a boat in a canal. So of course the most romantic thing to do in Venice is to go for a gondola ride with your sweetie. That's a fun thing to do. But Venice is also a very, very wealthy city. And before Italy became a country, Venice actually had its own empire, and it dominated much of the trade in the Mediterranean area. So Venice had a lot of money. And the cathedral in Venice, St. Mark's Cathedral, is just about paved in gold. It's an incredible feast for the eyes that's well worth seeing. And then I like to encourage people to get out of town a little bit and to head across the lagoon to two of the islands that are out there, Murano with an M and Burano with a B. And Murano is famous for its blown glass. Many people have heard of Murano glass. Mm-hmm. And then Burano is famous for its lace. So they have people who make very intricate handmade lace there. So it makes for a really nice day trip. You can go to these two islands and actually spend a little time relaxing on the beach as well, because you're on the ocean and there's some nice beaches there.
So when you say we should get out, how would you recommend that we see Italy?
So Italy's a great country from the perspective that you have a lot of different choices in terms of how you'd like to see it. So if you want to focus on kind of a land vacation, there are a lot of great guided tours of Italy. Small group tours, larger group tours, moderately priced luxury tours that are going to give you a chance to see all of the highlights in a very seamless way. Everything's taken care of. And guided tours are also very efficient because you sort of go from place to place and you don't have to waste a lot of time with the logistics of getting there.
And they drop you off for the most part,
they drop you off right at the door,
which is nice if you have mobility issues.
Yeah, it's nice if you have mobility issues. And I think the other thing that makes a guided tour really nice is that you have that guide. Or if you're going to, say, the Vatican museums, you have a guide who's going to explain to you what you see. And I really think that that's an important aspect of visiting a country, is to understand what you see and not just to read the placards on the wall in a museum, but have somebody tell you those stories that really bring the whole experience to life. So guided tours are a great way to see Italy. Italy's never very far from the sea. You're never too far from the ocean. So cruises are another great way to explore Italy, as well as some of the surrounding countries like France, Croatia, combine very nicely to make a cruise. And then finally, you can go to Italy as an independent traveler. And when you do that, you can either sort of go independently with certain things arranged for you before you go, or you can go on a privately guided vacation where it's just you and your traveling party, and you have guides and transfers and all those things set up so that you have kind of that same experience you'd have on a group guided tour, just done privately for you.
And again, you can help us. So how do you put these trips together?
So the occupational hazard of being a travel agent is that I do have the opportunity to travel fairly often. So I've been to Italy several times, not just for vacation, but to kind of meet the folks who operate the tours, who operate the shore excursions, who own the hotels in Italy. So I have a real deep knowledge of the best places to stay and the best companies to work with. So what I'll do is I'll sit down and meet with people who are thinking about going to Italy. We'll talk about what they want to do, what types of places they like to stay, what their budget is, and then I'll come back with some recommendations for them. We'll kind of talk through those recommendations, put it all together, make the booking, and then before they go, we'll talk about COVID travel restrictions, other things they need to be aware of. I'm very often asked a question by ladies about, will my hairdryer work? in Italy. So the answer is no. don't bother. There's a free tip, but no, the answer is no. But all those little logistical things like currency and
what do you do if you need a hairdryer?
well, the good news is that they have hairdryers in Italy too, and every hotel has a hairdryer in it. The curling irons, that's where sometimes it can get a little bit sticky. So I tend to recommend that people just buy one when they get there, because the power converters never work exactly as you would hope. And so that when those people are traveling in Italy, I'm also available. So if something happens that can't be fixed on the ground, I'm available to help make sure we can keep that trip on track. And if it's something, really bad and we need to get them home, then I'm available to do that as well.
What are some of the things that have happened?
It can be all sorts of things. Many times it's actually not the travelers who end up with a problem, but they might have a relative who has a medical emergency back home.
And they need
to get home right away. We tend to forget about it, but crossing the street is a pretty dangerous thing to do. So people sometimes will trip or they'll have a little accident. And in most cases, the Italian hospitals can take care of that and get them back on their way. But if they do need to be brought home, we'd work with their travel insurance company to get them back home.
And you would recommend travel insurance?
Yes, I highly recommend travel insurance. Absolutely. Italy is a place that you can visit pretty much in any of the 4 seasons. Winter is a very nice time to go because it's not really very crowded, but I tend to think spring and fall are the best times to go. In the summer, it can be really hot. The temperature in Rome can be 125, that would be pretty, 115 degrees, we'll say. A lot of sun, and if you're out walking around, it can be a little unpleasant, which you're going to do because you want to see those things. So to me, spring and fall are the best times to go. And I really think 2023 is going to be a good year to go because even though Europe is reopened to Americans, they haven't reopened to the entire world yet. And so I think there will be fewer tourists from across the globe in Italy this year, which makes it a good time to go.
Ted, how can we get a hold of you and learn more, please?
Best way to get a hold of me is to visit my website. It's tedblanktravel.com. You can give me a call at 651-964-8245, or you can go to facebook.com/tedblanktravel.
Great to see you. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
And you are listening to another edition of The Travel Show with your host, Ted Blank of Ted Blank Luxury Travel and Adventure. And this is AM 1460 and FM 97.7 KDWA in Hastings. This travel show has been brought to you by Ted Blank Luxury Travel and Adventures.